The clock tower he swore was under repair. The calendar square slid into the evening at 6:12 p.m., neat as a badge. Civic Gala, City Hall late. 2 minutes later, Jules texted, "Don't wait up. Mayor wants a quick walkthrough of the renovations. Proud of me." Read he spends the heart when the rest of the sentence would prefer to be graded on a curve. I turned the flame beneath the soup to the kind of simmer that calls itself maturity and looked out toward City Hall. The sandstone stack and its clock tower loomed above the square like an expensive conscience. The square on my phone pulsed once, then behaved. I rinsed an already clean spoon because some nights the only honest verb available is unnecessary. At 6:39 my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize and a message that recognized me anyway. If the mayor's on the ground floor, why did he just badge the clock tower service door? Janitor's entry off Grove. The bolt looked stubborn. Lift then push. Signed with a single letter, M, as if the alphabet had leaned against a door and promised to keep watch. Miles runs evening facilities the way a good conductor runs silence, precise, invisible, owed more than he'll ever bill. He and Jules trade competence when committees confuse choreography with achievement. Miles and I have shared 2 cigarettes under a rain gutter and a laugh that made the weather feel briefly employed. We have not touched. I remember not touching more clearly than some men remember names. "Why tell me?" I wrote. "Because your calendar is polite and my key logs aren't," he sent. Because he looked up before he swiped. People only look up on that stair when they want oxygen. Because the tower is under repair, the way a tux is temporary. The janitor's entry sat in a shadow that made a promise of anonymity. The bolt sulked. I lifted, then pushed, and the door remembered it was meant to obey. Inside, the service corridor smelled like cold stone and wax, the particular honesty of buildings that have hosted too many speeches. A metal stair spiraled up into the tower, steps narrow as bad choices. I climbed. The city followed through the louvers as a rumor of traffic and light. The clockwork chamber welcomed me with a hush that had practiced. Gears the size of dinner tables turned with patient inevitability. Cables dropped toward bells that were not currently feeling theatrical. On a landing nearby, Jules stood with his jacket off and his shirt open, one button past credible. Opposite him, 2 fingers resting on a beam in the posture of men who think they were born at altitude, was Anton Vale, developer, donor, a rumor with better posture than receipts. His hand hovered near Jules's wrist without landing. Because proximity photographs better than contact when your brand pays for restoration and invoices discretion. "Under repair looks operable," I said from the stair mouth, my voice behaving like it had been briefed. Jules turned. For a beat the truth used his face like a window, then the version of him that likes committees remembered the audience. "Owen," he said, how did." "Miles prefers nouns," I said. "I prefer doors." Anton smiled with the benevolent malice of a man who can afford lighting. "We were evaluating safety," he said. "Donors like to imagine themselves responsible." "I prefer responsible when it shows up without an audience," I said. Jules took 1 step toward me and gave the second back to the beam. "We were talking about the unveiling," he said. He wanted to see the clock from the inside. "Inside looks good on everyone," Anton said. He lifted his palms. 2 minutes. The hour hand is unforgiving. He drifted to the far side of the gear cage where the shadow looked expensive. As he passed, 2 fingers tapped Jules's shoulder, a punctuation mark that believed in itself. The machinery ignored us on principle. Jules watched me with the expression of a man trying to decide whether the door he chose counts as an exit or an arrival. "I was going to text you," he said, lower now. the register he keeps for early light and the soft under my jaw. After, I wanted to know I could leave this room without being told how. You wanted to be caught, I said, not punished, caught. He breathed once, which in this chamber qualified as a confession. Yes. There is a temperature at which grammar retires from service. I crossed the plank and put my mouth on his because steel deserves honesty now and then. He kissed back with the relief of a man who has been practicing restraint in rooms that like invoices. He tasted like Gala bourbon and old stone. My thumb found the hinge of his jaw and pressed. He made the small, involuntary sound I keep receipts for. His palm slid under my shirt and settled between my shoulder blades like a promise that does not require a proclamation. We didn't undress. The tower charges extra and the bells are poor witnesses. He broke the kiss first because he knows the exact second heat becomes narrative. He rested his forehead against mine, clocks breathed around us, indifferent to drama. I didn't kiss him, he said. I wanted to want to. I texted Miles instead. You did, I said. He prefers oxygen to salvage. From the shadow near the pulley, Anton tilted his head with the courtesy of a man confirming that the city still behaves like he expects. He didn't move closer. Far below, a microphone tested applause. Come home, Jules said. After I thanked the man who trusts gears, I said. Miles was a silhouette on the stair, hands in pockets, radio dark. He didn't smile. He also didn't make this cost more than it had to. The set change hits this stairwell in 90 seconds, he said. If you don't want to meet a committee with clipboards, use the west fire door. It pretends to stick. It likes conviction. You sent the message, I said. I opened a door, he said. You two remembered the rest. We descended into the building's working heart. The west fire door pretended reluctance and then chose our side. Outside, the square had begun its choreography. We walked the long way home so we wouldn't owe anyone an explanation with a garnish. In the kitchen, the soup forgave me for checking the time too often. We ate standing, like mammals who know where the salt lives. He told me Anton had spent a month sculpting a compliment into a proposition, and he had helped because selection feels like love when usefulness has emptied your pockets. I told him Miles had texted because some men prefer air to rumor. He didn't ask whether Miles and I had ever been unprofessional together. I didn't say that the gutter behind the annex knows the exact shape of his mouth when he lights his second smoke. Later in bed, we left a sliver of cool like a reservation and then let it surrender because restraint is only elegant when it's not permanent. He kissed me with the steadiness I trust more than policy. I put my mouth where his jaw loses confidence and told it a morning we could afford. It was heat without theater. The building minded its radiators. The city practiced speeches to an empty room. He fell asleep with his hand on my wrist, not as proof, not as claim, just counting what we are trying to keep. Morning behaved. Coffee made its case. The calendar square for tonight stayed blank, which in this town is the kink we can afford. Jules tied a tie over a throat I intend to retire with patience and kissed me like the door already knew our names. He left to rehearse a ribbon cutting that would try to flatter the air. At 9:10, a text arrived from a number saved under one letter. No tower cams watched anything but gears. I let the feed admire a pendulum for 20 minutes. Consider it maintenance. I sent, you're very proud of your pendulums. He replied, I'm proud of your exit. No punctuation correct. By noon, a civic blog posted a photo of Anton on the grand staircase with a caption about stewardship and time. I scrolled past. It wasn't our room. At 1:28, Jules texted a picture of our kitchen table with the plant we keep refusing to let die basking in a square of honest sun. Room exists, he wrote. The week behaved like a politician, reasonable in print, less elegant up close. Anton sent a revised pledge with fewer adjectives and more commas. Jules read it standing at the counter, then set it face down and rested his forehead against my temple for a quiet count of 7. We didn't say anything the city could use. 2 evenings later, City Hall hosted a donors-only preview. We went together, because sometimes the correct grammar is plural. Miles nodded once from the staff entrance like an usher who has chosen a side. Anton shook Jules's hand while a photographer made the staircase behave. A reporter asked about legacy. Jules said, "Clocks tell the truth whether or not you write speeches," and the room tried to laugh without sounding guilty. When the bells chimed for the first public test, the floor shivered with the small astonishment of citizens who still like being impressed. We stood near the back and listened to the city meet its own hours. After the third strike, Jules's fingers found my wrist in the way that says not mine but here, and I forgave the building for everything it had cost us to arrive intact. Then the internet practiced its vocation. An anonymous account posted a grainy still of 2 silhouettes high in the tower, one with a hand too near to be casual. The caption invented entanglement, the comments rented outrage and charged it per click. I put my phone down next to the plant and watched the plant win. Jules forwarded me a different view, the clockwork in bright morning, Miles with grease on his knuckles showing a junior tech where time actually lives. Our version keeps the hour, he wrote. On Sunday, Miles texted, "Tower's quiet. Want the gear room when it isn't performing." We went. He showed us how the escapement works, why the weights insist, which screws complain first in humidity. He didn't flirt with anything, not even the truth. He stood with his hands in his pockets and told us a joke about rich men who think chiming is a metaphor. I liked him better for not needing to be right about anything except the work. The following week, the ribbon finally had its day. The mayor did gratitude with his best mouth. Anton pledged something measurable in a way accountants would enjoy. Jules spoke about bolts and volunteers and the joy of maintenance, which is the only speech that ever ages correctly. After, Anton shook his hand and then looked at me the way expensive men look at whether they cannot purchase. "You're both very good at exits," he said. "Practice," I said. He laughed because he had to respect it. It didn't stay tidy. A columnist with a talent for adjectives suggested Jules's access owes to private tour. The piece included a photo of the tower that could have been any tower and a paragraph that could have been any rumor. The comments did their choreography. I took the plant to the kitchen sink and watered it until it stopped looking like an argument. That night we skipped the speeches and walked around the square instead, listening to the clock try on its new honesty. A girl on a scooter looked up on the hour and grinned like the city had personally remembered her birthday. Jules squeezed my wrist and didn't pretend not to be moved. When we got home, we reheated leftovers and forgave the stove for being terrible at applause. At the bedroom door, he kissed me the way good sentences land, without ornament, unavoidable. I answered as if verbs were the last tender currency. It keeps not being simple. Anton keeps sending commas that want homes. Jules keeps returning them with better ones. Miles keeps opening the correct door and refusing credit. The plant keeps inventing a shade of green that seems frankly unserious. We keep our calendar squares blank on purpose, because blanks are the only promises rooms respect. Sometimes, on the walk back from the market, Jules takes my wrist lightly and says nothing, which is how I know he's remembering the tower and the 2 minutes that were enough. Sometimes I think about Anton paused in the gear room like a man watching time he cannot buy, and I understand the only legacy I want is a list of exits we used correctly and a handful of rooms that forgave us for arriving. Tonight's square is empty. We're leaving it that way. The city can keep its speeches, the clock will tell the truth regardless. We have the west door, a plant we refuse to let die, and the quiet grammar of a decision that knows where it belongs. Not in the rumor, not in the photo, but in the mouth that learned to say come home and mean it. If we get caught again, let it be by each other. The rest of the city can rehearse applause. We'll be in the room that doesn't need it, counting the seconds we chose on purpose and calling that a life.